at the Sterling family's bankruptcy liquidation hearing. I reached out and wrapped my arm around the slender waist of Avery, the ice queen of Wall Street, who was standing beside me, as the entire room looked on in shock. She kissed me on the cheek and whispered in my ear, "Mr. Vance, the lifeblood of this city now rests on your nightstand. Welcome to Windfall, Lord, an exciting story is about to begin." Silence, in the disciplinary hearing room at Westbridge Royal University, which smelled of aged cedar. The dean of students brought his wooden gavel down with a heavy thud. "My name is Lincoln, and right now I'm sitting all alone in the defendant's chair, like a prisoner nailed to a cross. Across the long table sits Carter Sterling, the heir to the West Coast Sterling financial empire. Today, he's wearing a well-tailored, custom-made suit. He's leaning back lazily in his leather chair, twirling the limited edition Rolex on his wrist, reportedly worth $300,000, with that classic, mocking smile typical of a rich kid playing on the corner of his lips. "Lincoln Vance," the dean of students said, pushing up his gold-rimmed glasses. His gaze was as if he were looking at a pile of stinking garbage. "Following the Board of Trustees' preliminary investigation into the allegations that you broke into Mr. Carter's locker room to steal a luxury watch and subsequently attempted to exchange a plagiarized paper for hush money. Do you have even the slightest reasonable explanation? I'll say this one last time. I didn't even touch the doorknob to his locker." I stared the dean in the eyes, my voice as cold as ice. "Carter was the one who slipped the watch into my locker. He's been jealous ever since I won the only full scholarship this semester." Still putting on a brave face. "Are you broke ass?" Carter snorted derisively, leaning forward slightly. "Mr. Dean, it looks like we'll have to call in a key witness. After all, some truths can only be seen by those closest to you." The heavy door to the hearing room swung open. In that instant, I felt my heart skip a beat. The one who walked in was Serena Lockwood, with her dazzling blonde hair. She was my childhood sweetheart, the girl I'd sworn to protect with my very future, to help her cover the exorbitant tuition and fees at this prestigious university. I worked night shifts on the side for a full year and a half. "Selena," I said, looking at her hopefully, "tell them you were with me in the library the whole time yesterday afternoon. I never even went to the locker room." However, Serena didn't even glance at me. She walked straight over to Carter, who, with the utmost naturalness, reached out and wrapped his arm around her waist. Not only did Serena not resist, but she actually leaned obediently against his shoulder and squeezed out a few crocodile tears. "Director," Serena said, her voice trembling slightly as she played the part of the perfect victim, "I can't keep covering for him anymore. Lincoln really wasn't at the library yesterday, and he's been staring at me with this creepy look lately. And he's even been sending me harassing text messages, pressuring me to help him give false testimony." Boom! It was as if a heavy-duty truck loaded with cement had run right over my brain. The humiliation and rage brought on by the betrayal raged through my veins. I finally understood that at this elite university ruled by money and power, the truth about poor people doesn't mean a damn thing. To squeeze her way into Carter's high society circle, Serena didn't hesitate to use me as a stepping stone to climb the social ladder. That is the whole truth. The dean of students struck the gavel without hesitation. "Lincoln Vance, you are immediately expelled from the university and stripped of all scholarships. You have 10 minutes to get off the Westbridge Royal University campus, or I'll have security throw you out." 10 minutes later, I was standing outside the campus's towering iron gate, clutching a tattered cardboard box. The cold late autumn wind blew straight down my collar. Inside the gate, Carter was driving his Aston Martin sports car, with Serena in the passenger seat, laughing so hard she was shaking. Carter arrogantly flipped me off and roared away, revving the engine as he sped off. They thought this would allow them to crush me completely into the mud at the very bottom. But the very next second after the sports car's taillights disappeared, a cold, mechanical voice, one filled with an indescribable sense of oppression, suddenly rang out from the depths of my mind. Without any warning. "Beep. Host detected outside the campus perimeter. Retinal scan for genetic lock initiated. Scan complete. DNA sequence verified. Identity confirmed. Lincoln Vance, the sole legal heir of the Vance family." I froze in my tracks, and the cardboard box in my hand almost fell to the ground. Damn it, what's going on? I'm clearly just a poor orphan who grew up on welfare. The Vance conglomerate's 100 billion yuan inheritance system has been officially unlocked. Basic access has been granted. The voice in his head continued to report matter-of-factly. "Dear Mr. Vance, hello? The vast assets bequeathed to your family have been unfrozen. Your current available cash balance is 100 billion US dollars. Your Swiss private bank's top-tier black card has been sent to the hidden compartment at the bottom of your cardboard box." With trembling hands, I abruptly peeled back the cardboard at the bottom of the box. A jet-black bank card, emanating a dark metallic sheen and edged with, lay there quietly. On the back of the card, my name was clearly engraved. 100 billion US dollars. In cash. There are many people in the world with assets worth 10 billion. But those who can access 100 billion in pure cash at any time and anywhere have enough to buy half a country's lifeline. I slowly raised my head and looked once more at the resplendent Westbridge Royal University, a bloodthirsty, cold smile curving my lips. Carter, Serena, and all those high and mighty board members. Today you took away my ridiculous scholarship, thinking you've won. But I'm sorry, I have no intention of rushing back there to yell at you. After all, when you're sitting on $100 billion, it's just in poor taste to flip the table. I'm going to stay hidden in the shadows and, bit by bit, buy up this university, your family, and the entire city you're so proud of, down to the last detail. The game has only just begun. Holding that heavy black card, I didn't rush into the luxury stores in Beverly Hills to go on a shopping spree like some lottery-winning nouveau riche. Nor did I drive a limited-edition sports car back to the gates of Westbridge Royal University to honk the horn and show off. In this cutthroat world of capitalism, if you're sitting on $100 billion but haven't built a fortress strong enough to protect it, you're nothing more than a walking, blood-scented piece of meat. The Sterlings, a local power broker family that's ruled the West Coast for over a century, have 10,000 ways to make a newly rich upstart vanish from the face of the earth. That's why I need people who have also been squeezed into a corner by capital, yet possess the extraordinary talent needed to turn the tables. I pulled the hood of my sweatshirt over my head and winged my way through the dark, damp slums of East Los Angeles, eventually coming to a stop in front of a dilapidated auto repair shop with a roll-up door covered in graffiti, reeking of motor oil and the sour smell of stale pizza. I simply pushed open the rickety iron gate next to me and walked inside. There was almost no light in the garage, save for a dozen or so computer monitors stacked on top of one another, emitting an eerie blue glow. In front of the screens, a young man with hair so greasy you could fry food in it, and wearing thick black-rimmed glasses was frantically pounding away at the keyboard. The floor around him was littered with empty energy drink cans. Get out of here. Can't you see the closed sign hanging out front? He didn't even turn his head, his voice hoarse as if it had been sanded down with sandpaper. If you're here to collect a debt, tell your boss I've got no money, just my life. Tell him to go ahead and cut off my leg. Declan Hayes. He was once one of Silicon Valley's most talented top-tier hackers and cybersecurity architects. 6 months ago, a revolutionary encryption algorithm he designed caught the eye of a technology company owned by the Sterling family. They resorted to every underhanded tactic imaginable. Not only did they forcibly steal his patent, but they also turned the tables on him, fabricating evidence to sue him for trade secret infringement. As a result, Declan now faces a staggering claim of up to $3 million US and the threat of bankruptcy. Now, he has no choice but to hide out in this dilapidated garage teeming with rats, barely scraping by taking on illegal hacking jobs from the dark web. The Sterling family doesn't just want your legs, they're filing for a court order to seize your property. First thing tomorrow morning, this doghouse you're hiding in will be sealed off, along with all your crappy computers. I walked up behind him, my tone as calm as if I were talking about the weather. The sound of typing stopped abruptly. Declan spun around, grabbed a heavy wrench from the table, and glared at me like a cornered beast. Who the hell are you? Some dog sent by those bastards at Sterling? If I were their lackey, it wouldn't be this nonsense pressed against your head right now, it'd be a loaded Glock. I pulled down my hood and stared straight into his bloodshot eyes. I'm here to deliver you a bullet. Bullets? Declan snorted derisively. Dude, you look like some broke college kid who just got kicked out of his dorm. Do you have any idea how much debt I'm in? $3 million. You probably can't even scrape together enough to buy me a cup of coffee. I didn't say anything. I just pulled the all-black bank card out of my pocket and walked over to the computer next to me, which was clearly set up for dark web transactions. Bring up your debt collection account, I ordered. Declan hesitated for a moment, but still tapped away at the keyboard with some skepticism. The court's enforcement account interface popped up on the screen. The bright red number with a minus sign at the top was so jarring it felt despair-inducing. I quickly swiped my card, entered the amount, and pressed the enter key. Beep, a crisp system alert echoed through the empty garage. On the large screen, the red number representing Declan's hellish debt flickered for an instant, reset to 0, and then changed to a blinding green paid in full. Not only that, but his personal account now showed an additional $10 million US in available funds. Clang. The wrench in Declan's hand fell to the floor and hit his toe. But he didn't even flinch. He stared intently at the screen as if he were looking at a monster, then fixed his gaze on me, his hands shaking violently from sheer shock. What the hell did you do? That's $10 million. All cash. Declan's voice was trembling. Did you fucking rob the Federal Reserve or something? Don't ask so many pointless questions. This $10 million is for you, and for the exclusive rights to this rundown garage. I pulled over a dusty chair and sat down, folding my arms across my chest. From now on, I want you to completely give up those low-level dark web jobs and upgrade your hacking network to military-grade standards. What are you up to? Declan swallowed hard, the wariness in his eyes having given way to intense fervor. He knew that someone who could casually toss around $10 million in cash wasn't here to do charity work. It's simple, I said. staring at my cold reflection on the screen. I want you to help me set up a shadow business network. All cash flows must be encrypted at the highest level. Under no circumstances can anyone trace the source of these 100 billion. I stood up, walked over to him, and patted him on the shoulder. Don't you hate the Sterling family for ruining everything you had? Declan, get your keyboard ready. Starting tonight, I want you to gradually turn the Sterling family's business empire into a sieve. Bit by bit, in the online world. I want them to become my puppets without even realizing it. Declan looked at me, and the fire deep in his eyes was fully ignited. He abruptly pushed aside the empty soda can in front of him, interlaced his fingers, and his knuckles cracked with a sharp sound. Boss, he grinned, revealing a chilling smile. It's an honor to serve you. Get ready to enjoy the wonderful sight of the Sterling family's assets being drained away bit by bit. I nodded and walked out of the garage. The night wind was cold, but my blood was boiling. The net I'd been laying in wait has been cast. Now it's time to let those high and mighty tycoons taste what a true capital stranglehold really feels like. In the second week after Declan's rat-infested garage had become my ghost command center, the weather in Los Angeles was still as hot as a giant oven. Wearing that gray hoodie that had been washed until it was almost white, with a pair of worn-out canvas sneakers whose soles were nearly worn flat, and holding a cup of cheap $2 convenience store coffee, I strolled slowly through the streets of the city's busiest financial district. The Wall Street elites passing by, dressed in haute couture suits and red-soled high heels, looked at me as if I were a piece of gum that had accidentally stuck to the sole of their shoe, eager to keep me at arm's length. They had no idea that just 10 minutes earlier, I had used the encrypted terminal on my phone to cut 2 fatal slits into the city's economic lifeline. Boss, just want to confirm. Declan's voice, shaking with excitement, came through my Bluetooth headset, accompanied by the deafening clatter of keyboard keys in the background. The first tranche of funds has been successfully laundered through 73 offshore shell companies in the Cayman Islands and transferred to the account of the largest shareholder of the Pacific Power Grid Group. A $30 million premium acquisition. The other party skipped the haggling altogether and signed the share transfer agreement on the spot. Now, all it takes is a nod from you. And this city, from traffic lights to ventilators in hospitals, and even the central air conditioning in the Sterling conglomerate headquarters, will depend on your approval for its power supply. I bit down on the plastic straw in my coffee cup, stopped in the shadow at the base of a skyscraper, and looked up at the Sterling building diagonally across the street, its glass gleaming dazzlingly. What's the next step? I asked calmly. Step 2 went off without a hitch. 2. Declan gulped down an energy drink and let out a loud belch. We used a full $200 million in pure cash to secure a 51% controlling stake in Long Beach Ocean Port and force our way through their board of directors. The Sterling family had been in negotiations with them, trying to drive down the price for that key container terminal. But then we showed up out of nowhere with cash in hand. When those directors saw the cold, hard cash in the account, they kicked the Sterling family's acquisition representatives out like they were beggars. I couldn't help but let out a soft chuckle. In this capitalist meat grinder, cash is the only truth. Although the Sterling family claims to have assets worth $10 billion, most of that consists of stocks, real estate, and complex trust funds. They don't actually have much in the way of liquid assets. They're used to leveraging debt to tap into other people's assets. They're used to getting something for nothing. Unfortunately, they ran into me, a poor kid with a cheat code of $100 billion in pure cash. I don't need to take out a bank loan. I don't need to beg those vampire-like venture capital firms. And I certainly don't need to kowtow to anyone. With $100 billion in withdrawal limits and no minimum threshold, I can sweep through any of the city's key economic arteries at will. Just like buying discounted potato chips at the supermarket. Boss, I've detected a major uproar on the Sterling family's encrypted communication channel. Declan chuckled maliciously through his headset. That idiot Carter's father, the current head of the Sterling family, Old Man Sterling, is flying into a rage in his office. They've always viewed the port of Long Beach as the key to opening up trade routes to Asia next quarter. Now that the deal's fallen through, the old man's so furious, he nearly smashed his desk. Let him go at it. They'll soon find out this is just an appetizer. I tossed my empty coffee cup precisely into the trash can by the roadside, my gaze growing colder. Declan, classify all the acquisition documents as top secret. Officially, the current owner of these assets is a mysterious overseas venture capital fund called the Abyss. Don't let them trace this back to me under any circumstances. Don't worry, boss. Even if the Sterling family brought in the CIA's cybersecurity experts, all they'd find in the end would be a bunch of shell companies registered on some deserted island in the Caribbean. Declan assured him with confidence. I hung up the phone, shoved my hands into the pockets of my hoodie, and turned to walk toward the subway station. Just then, an incredibly flashy, fiery red Aston Martin sports car, accompanied by a deafening roar of its engine, slammed on the brakes and came to a screeching halt right on the curb, less than half a meter away from me. If I hadn't instinctively taken a step back, that scorching exhaust pipe would have burned right through my jeans. The car window rolled down, revealing Carter's smug face behind his sunglasses. In the passenger seat sat Serena, still dressed like an expensive Barbie doll. Hey, isn't this Lincoln Vance, the former full scholarship recipient from Westbridge Royal University? Carter took off his sunglasses, eyed my shabby outfit from head to toe, and burst into a malicious, cackling laugh. What's the matter? After getting expelled from school, you couldn't even find a job as a busboy? Are you here waiting for a handout? Selena looked at me, a flicker of complex emotion passing through her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by haughty contempt. She placed her hand on Carter's thigh and said in a sweet, coquettish voice, Carter, don't pay him any mind. Scum like him will dirty your eyes if you even look at him twice. We need to hurry up and try on that $80,000 diamond necklace you ordered for me yesterday. Hearing her nauseating tone, I was surprisingly unmoved. In fact, I even found it a little ridiculous. $80,000? Just a moment ago, without batting an eye, I shelled out $230 million to buy the city's power grid and port. If I wanted to, I could turn off all the traffic lights on the street right now and plunge the Sterling building into total darkness. But I didn't do that, because watching my prey thrash around in the trap is way more fun than blowing its head off with a single shot. Carter, I said, my hands in my pockets, staring him straight in the eye as I suddenly flashed a sinister smile. Have a nice test drilling trip today. Oh, and remember to remind your father that the winds and waves at the port have been a bit rough lately. He should be careful in his business dealings so he doesn't strain his back. Carter paused for a moment, clearly not understanding what I meant by that out-of-the-blue remark. He muttered, You're crazy, then slammed his foot down on the gas pedal. The sports car let out a deafening roar, spewing exhaust fumes all over me, and sped off. I stood there, watching the red sports car disappear into the stream of traffic, a smile spreading wider and wider across my face. Go ahead and laugh. Carter, laugh as loud as you can. Because soon, you won't even have a place to cry. In a city like Los Angeles, a city fueled by capital, the best way to destroy a conceited person is definitely not to take his money away outright, but to generously and unhesitatingly lend him even more. It's like handing a dying man a cup of nectar laced with a deadly poison. Not only will he drink it with tears of gratitude, but he'll also ask for another cup of his own accord. Carter Sterling is currently in that phase where he's desperately craving poison. After the acquisition of Long Beach Port unexpectedly fell through, old Sterling humiliated Carter mercilessly at the board meeting, calling him a good-for-nothing who only knew how to play with sports cars and women. For Carter, who had always prided himself on being a business genius, this was more painful than death itself. To prove himself once again, and, more importantly, to solidify his position as the future heir to the conglomerate, Carter, like a gambler blinded by the urge to win, set his sights on an extremely risky behemoth. Star Valley Silicon Wafer Manufacturing. This is a tech company on the brink of bankruptcy but possessing core technology. If they can acquire it, the Sterling family will gain absolute influence over the tech industry chain on the West Coast. The only obstacle is that, to pull off this hostile David and Goliath-style takeover, Carter needs at least $500 million in short-term working capital. The Sterling family couldn't come up with the money on their own, and after assessing the risks, those old foxes on Wall Street, the bankers, all politely turned down Carter's loan application. Boss, this idiot has his back against the wall. In the dilapidated garage, Declan chewed on cold pizza while his fingers flew across the keyboard. He's now frantically searching through dark web brokers for any private investors willing to lend him money. The interest rate has skyrocketed to an absurd 30% APR. I sat in that dusty chair, fingering the jet black bank card, and let out a cold laugh. 30% annualized? Does he really think that after swallowing up that manufacturing plant, the profits will cover such exorbitant interest? I shook my head and glanced at Declan. Let's play the long game, Declan. Send him a letter of intent for a loan in the name of the Abyss Fund. $500 million. In cash only. To be deposited within 3 days. The interest rate is just 8%. 8%? Declan nearly choked on his pizza. He stared at me wide-eyed. Boss, are you out of your mind? We're setting him up to go under. This isn't some charity project. An 8% interest rate on a high-risk bridge loan like this is practically giving it away for free. You don't know what you're talking about. I stood up and walked over to the screen filled with complex data streams, my gaze as sharp as a knife's edge. If the interest rate is too high, that old fox Sterling will definitely get suspicious. He might even forcefully block Carter's deal. Only if the terms are enticing enough, so enticing they seem like a windfall, will a fool like Carter, who's desperate to prove himself, take the bait without hesitation. I pause, and the smile on my lips grew even colder. Moreover, the real killer clause has never been the interest rate. Add the following provision to the addendum of this loan agreement. If any of Carter's core projects, including the newly acquired manufacturing plant, experience a shutdown, a disruption in logistics, or a major credit crisis, the creditor, the Abyss Fund, has the right to demand that he repay the principal and interest in full within 24 hours. Otherwise, Abyss will unconditionally and forcibly take over all core assets pledged as collateral by the Sterling family. Declan gasped. The way he looked at me was as if he were looking at Satan disguised as an angel. Oh my God! Boss, that's a brilliant move. Declan tapped away at the keyboard, hiding these clauses within hundreds of pages of convoluted legal documents. The power grid and the port are now in our hands. As soon as the money clears and Carter completes the acquisition, we can cut off power to that manufacturing plant at any time, or seize their import and export containers. Once operations grind to a halt, the poison pill clause in the contract will be triggered. Carter won't just have to pay back the money, he'll have to hand over the very lifeblood of the entire Sterling family to us. Go ahead, I said calmly. 2 days later, in the presidential suite at Los Angeles' most luxurious Four Seasons hotel. Although I wasn't there in person, I could see everything clearly through the live surveillance footage that Declan hacked into the hotel's security system and sent back to me. Carter Sterling was wearing a flashy white suit, and he was so excited that his hands were shaking. He sat on the spacious sofa, looking at the contract handed to him by the top-notch legal team I'd hired at great expense. The loan confirmation for $500 million was already on the table. The Abyss Fund, what a strange name. But I like how efficient you guys are. Carter didn't even glance at the contract's addenda. He simply grabbed the Montblanc pen and signed his name in a sweeping, flowing script at the very end. In his view, that 8% interest rate was nothing short of a godsend. He had already begun to imagine himself taking the family board by storm after taking over the silicon wafer factory. After signing the contract, Carter raised a glass of champagne and burst into a cackling laugh. Please thank your boss behind the scenes for me. Tell him that once I've secured tech dominance on the West Coast, I'll invite him to my victory celebration. Sitting in front of the monitor, I watched Carter's face contort with intense excitement as I leisurely unscrewed the cap of a $2 bottle of mineral water and took a sip. Don't worry, Carter, I said coldly to the screen. I'll definitely be there in person to celebrate your victory. It's just that you might have to pay for it with the entire Sterling family. The game of teasing to lure has come to an end. Next, it's time to let this stupid pig walk right into the guillotine of capitalism. To celebrate the successful acquisition of Star Valley's silicon wafer manufacturing, Carter Sterling hosted an extravagantly lavish masquerade ball at his private estate in Beverly Hills. Prominent political and business figures from across the West Coast received gold-embossed invitations, and the driveway was lined with Rolls-Royces and Bentleys. Of course, I didn't receive an invitation, but I have another way to get in. Your bow tie's crooked. You poor kid. Hurry up and don't spill any champagne on those bigwig suits. You can't afford to pay for that. In the banquet hall's kitchen, the portly supervisor shoved me hard and shoved a sterling silver tray filled with Dom Perignon champagne into my hands. I was wearing a waiter's uniform that was slightly too big for me, and a half-black Venetian mask covered my face. With my head bowed, I silently picked up the tray and walked into the resplendent banquet hall. The ballroom was a glitzy, extravagant scene, filled with the scent of fine perfumes and the flutter of elegant gowns. Crystal chandeliers cast a dazzling glow, and melodious classical music floated through the air. I drifted through the crowd like a ghost, watching these so-called elite members of high society, wearing all manner of elaborate masks, as they exchanged insincere compliments with one another. It didn't take long for me to find the star of the evening. In the most prominent spot in the center of the ballroom, Carter, wearing a flamboyant golden lion mask, was surrounded by a crowd of sycophantic merchants who fawned over him like he was a celebrity. Serena, wearing an expensive, deeply haute couture evening gown and a white swan mask, nestled in Carter's arms like a proud queen, basking in the jealous glances of the women around her. Mr. Carter has really outdone himself this time. $500 million in cash. Just like that. A balding middle-aged man raised his glass obsequiously. The Sterling family is now calling the shots in tech manufacturing on the West Coast. Not at all, Carter said, feigning modesty, though his voice betrayed an unmistakable arrogance. Actually, I've always believed that in business, you have to be fast, precise, and ruthless. Those who hesitate and overthink are doomed to struggle in the mud at the bottom. Don't you agree? As he said this, his gaze wandered, perhaps intentionally, perhaps not, over the few waiters in the corner of the hall, as if to flaunt his innate nobility. Selina covered her mouth and let out a coy giggle, her voice so sickeningly sweet it made one want to vomit. Carter, why are you even bothering with those lowly, poor people? Even if they worked as illegal laborers their whole lives, they still wouldn't earn enough to pay for this glass of champagne you're drinking today. I stood behind a marble column less than 3 meters away from them, holding a tray, a cold, mocking smile playing at the corners of my mouth beneath the mask. A lowly pauper? Yeah, just 2 weeks ago, I was still washing dishes at a restaurant to help her scrape together her tuition. And now, this woman who climbed to the top by stepping on me is standing beneath the gallows I built with my own hands using $500 million. Mocking my poverty. I tilted my head slightly downward and pressed the miniature communicator hidden behind my ear. Declan, are you ready? I whispered. Boss, we're ready to move at any moment. Declan's excited breathing came through the headset. We've completely hijacked the control systems at Star Valley Manufacturing, over at Long Beach Harbor. The 12 cargo ships carrying their core equipment have already been forcibly detained at anchor. Just as you ordered, under the pretext of routine security checks. All it takes is one word from you. And tonight will be the end of the Sterling family. I looked up and quietly watched Carter as he laughed heartily. He had just raised a glass of champagne, ready to clink glasses with the bald businessman to celebrate his bright future. Cut off all power to the manufacturing plant. I ordered coldly. Remember, I want a complete physical disconnection. By the way, send the notice regarding the seizure of port equipment directly to all of the Sterling family's creditor banks. Got it, boss. Let's enjoy the show. It takes less than 10 seconds for my command to be issued. Suddenly, a rapid, shrill ring came from Carter's pocket. He frowned in annoyance, set down his glass, and answered the call. What is it? Didn't I say not to bother me tonight? What? Carter's voice suddenly rose an octave, and beneath his golden lion mask, his jaw clenched tightly. You're telling me there's a total power outage at the factory? What about the backup power? Is that down too? How could cargo ships at the port be detained for no reason? Are you fucking kidding me? The merchants around them sensed that something was wrong, stopped talking, and looked at him in surprise. Serena nervously grabbed Carter's arm. Before Carter could even recover from this bombshell, his father, Old Sterling, burst into the hall in a rage. Old Sterling wasn't even wearing his mask. His face was ashen, and he was clutching a cell phone tightly in his hand. Carter, what on earth have you done? You idiot? Old Sterling slapped Carter right across the face in front of all the guests. Smack! The slap rang out loud and clear, and the entire banquet hall fell instantly silent. Carter's golden mask was knocked askew, revealing his face, which was contorted with terror. Selena let out a scream of fright and stumbled backward. Dad, what happened? Carter asked, trembling as he covered his face with his hands. What's going on? Old Sterling was shaking with rage as he pointed his finger in Carter's face and shouted. Just a moment ago, 7 Wall Street banks called at the same time, saying there's a major risk with our collateralized assets and demanding that all our credit lines be frozen immediately. That $500 million you borrowed from that damn Abyss fund, the contract actually contains a poison pill clause for forced liquidation. Right now, our manufacturing plants have ground to a halt, and supplies from the ports have been cut off. The Abyss fund has just sent an official demand letter, requiring us to repay the full amount of $500 million, principal and interest, within 24 hours. Otherwise, they will forcibly seize all of the Sterling family's core assets. We're bankrupt. You idiot! You've ruined the Sterling family's century-old legacy. As Old Sterling's desperate roar echoed through the lavish hall, the political and business elites, who had been fawning over him just moments before, instantly began to look at Carter with the same evasiveness and contempt as if he were the plague itself. This is the ruthless world of capitalism. One moment you're king, the next, you're a dog, carrying a solid silver tray. I made my way through the utterly chaotic crowd to a long, empty table. I calmly removed the black mask from my face and tossed it into the trash can. The show is about to begin, and as for me, I no longer need to pretend. On Monday morning, the sky over Los Angeles was as gloomy as a gray sponge soaked with dirty water. The weather seemed tailor-made to sound the death knell for the Sterling family. I've moved out of Declan's garage, which reeked of stale pizza, and am now sitting comfortably on the leather sofa in the presidential suite on the top floor of the Waldorf Hotel. Through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, the skyscrapers of the entire financial district lie at my feet. The suite's living room has been transformed into a state-of-the-art financial command center, with dozens of monitors flashing an adrenaline-pumping stream of red and green data. Boss, Wall Street has opened. Declan was frantically pounding away at his keyboard. The candlestick chart for the Sterling Group on the screen looked like a fat man jumping off the top of the Empire State Building, tracing a brutal, vertical red line downward. It's only been 5 minutes since the market opened, and their stock price has plummeted by 40%. The market is in total panic. I held a glass of bourbon on the rocks and stared coldly at the screen. This is no ordinary business competition. It is a brutal financial massacre that I have been planning for a long time. The chain reaction triggered by the poison pill clause played out even more perfectly than I had imagined. With all the expensive silicon wafers rendered useless due to a power outage at the manufacturing plant, coupled with the massive penalty for the detention of a cargo ship at the port, the Sterling family's cash flow had been completely drained by last night. Early this morning, those Wall Street tycoons who usually treat them like brothers sensed blood in the water and immediately bared their fangs. The 7 major creditor banks have simultaneously triggered a chain of margin calls, Declan said, growing increasingly excited, his voice trembling. They've started forcibly selling off the Sterling family's pledged shares, causing the stock price to plummet even further. Carter's father even tried just now to use their family's private estate in Beverly Hills as collateral to borrow money at exorbitant interest rates. But no one dared to take the deal. When the house is about to come crashing down, even the rats will flee ahead of time, let alone those profit-hungry bankers. I took a sip of whiskey. The fiery liquid ran down my throat, giving me an incredibly satisfying sensation. Just then, the suite's heavy door was pushed open from the outside. A few bodyguards tried to stop me, but I waved my hand to signal them to step back. A woman walked in. She was wearing a silver-gray business suit that hugged her figure perfectly, paired with a pair of strikingly bold black high heels with red soles. Her sleek, short hair complemented her stunningly cold and beautiful face, and she exuded the aura of an ice queen who kept others at arm's length. Avery Thorne, Wall Street's top venture capital strategist, known as the Black Widow of the financial world. Any prey she sets her sights on is ultimately devoured whole, leaving nothing behind. Lincoln Vance, that famous scholarship student from Westbridge Royal University. Ignoring Declan's wary gaze, Avery walked straight up to my sofa, looking down at me with an icy blue gaze that flickered with a light that was both extremely dangerous and utterly captivating. Or perhaps I should address you as the mysterious dictator behind the Abyss Fund, the one who controls $100 billion? I didn't stand up. I just leaned back slightly against the sofa and looked at her with interest. How did you track me down? Your cybersecurity director really is a genius. He wiped out every digital trace, Avery said, glancing at Declan with a proud, cold smirk. But I never look at code. I only look at where the money flows. Anyone capable of forcibly acquiring the power grid and the port within just a few days, at a premium with absolutely no regard for cost, and precisely targeting every single node in the Sterling family's financial network is definitely not some overseas speculative capital. This is an extremely emotional, personally motivated, and overwhelming attack. I did a little digging following that absurd hearing at Westbridge Royal University, and I pieced together this truth that sends chills down my spine. As she said this, Avery suddenly leaned forward, resting her hands on the arms of my sofa. The scent of her expensive, crisp perfume instantly filled my lungs. Just 10 minutes ago, old Sterling and his good-for-nothing son Carter were on their knees in my office, sobbing and begging me to approve a $1 billion lifeline for them. Avery's nose was almost touching my face. Her voice was very low, with a hint of seductive hoarseness. Guess what I did? You didn't give it to me, I said calmly, looking her straight in the eye. Not only did I refuse, but I also went ahead and froze the last 2 offshore trust accounts they'd set up through our bank. Avery sat up straight, took the glass of whiskey I handed him, and downed it in one gulp. Mr. Vance, I, Avery Thorne, never do business with the dead. I'm here today to pledge my allegiance to the new king. In this cutthroat jungle of capital, absolute wealth is the most potent aphrodisiac. This aloof ice queen, upon witnessing my unfathomable cash flow of $100 billion, chose to submit without hesitation. You made a very smart decision, Avery. I stood up, walked over to the huge floor-to-ceiling window, and looked down at the city that was now mine. Declan, notify all the affiliated shell companies. I spun around abruptly, a flash of savage murderous intent crossing my eyes. Crack down on them across the board. Work with Avery's connections to force the liquidation of everything in the Sterling family's name, from their real estate, stocks, and luxury cars down to the underwear they wear, at the lowest possible scrap price. I want them to become the most pitiful homeless people on the streets of Los Angeles before the sun goes down. You got it, boss. Declan excitedly hit the enter key, as the network-wide net closing procedure was activated. A devastating financial storm completely swallowed up the Sterling family's last hope. All the traps snapped shut at once, and the prey had nowhere left to flee. On Wednesday afternoon, the campus of Royal University of Westbridge was bathed in sunshine, and white doves on Fountain Square were lazily pecking at breadcrumbs. Everything looked as peaceful and dignified as ever, exuding that nauseating sense of superiority typical of a long-established aristocratic school. However, this tranquility was soon shattered by a deafening roar. What's that? Oh my God! It's a helicopter. Who would dare to land in the school's central plaza? Across the campus, the wealthy students in their expensive school uniforms covered their ears in terror and looked up at the sky. An all-black Augusta AW-139 heavy-lift helicopter, bearing the Abyss Capital logo, descended like the Grim Reaper himself, its rotor blades churning up a violent gust of wind as it touched down steadily in the very center of Fountain Square. The immense wind pressure sent the surrounding umbrellas and benches reeling in all directions, even knocking several usually haughty fraternity members flat onto the lawn. The cabin door opened. 2 rows of armed bodyguards dressed in black suits and wearing sunglasses were the first to jump out, quickly clearing the surrounding area. Then, wearing a pair of gleaming, custom-made leather shoes, I stepped off the helicopter. Avery, dressed in that intimidating business suit and holding a thick stack of documents, followed half a step behind me with an icy expression. Lincoln? A scream of disbelief rang out from the crowd. I looked in the direction of the sound and saw Serena clutching Carter's arm tightly, staring at me as if she'd seen a ghost. Carter looked even more pitiful than a homeless person on the street. The bespoke suit he once wore with such swagger was now wrinkled like dried pickles. His eyes were sunken, his hair was a mess, and his gaze was filled with utter exhaustion and despair. Over the past 48 hours, he had watched with his own eyes as his family's century-old empire crumbled in an instant, and his father, old Sterling, had been rushed to the intensive care unit after suffering a sudden heart attack. Now, aside from the clothes on his back, he had nothing left. How did you end up here? Carter's voice was hoarse, like a broken bellows. He pointed tremblingly at the helicopter behind me. Whose helicopter is that? Weren't you kicked out? Security. Where's security? The dean of students, the same one who had once publicly humiliated me, rushed over, panting heavily and pushing through the crowd, accompanied by several school security guards. Lincoln Vance, how dare you? An expelled thief. Come back here? Get him out of here immediately, or I'll call the police. I ignored his clownish roar, simply smoothed out the cuffs of my suit jacket, and cast a casual glance at Avery beside me. Avery let out a cold laugh, strode forward in her high heels, and slammed the documents she was holding down hard on the dean's chest. Open your dog eyes and take a good look. You idiot. Avery's voice was as piercing as shards of ice. Standing before you is the ultimate controller of Abyss Capital, Mr. Lincoln Vance. Just this morning at 9 o'clock, Mr. Vance completed his acquisition of a controlling stake in the educational foundation behind Westbridge Royal University. In other words, he is now the university's highest-ranking trustee and holds absolute authority to expel anyone here, including you. Boom! That statement hit like a bombshell, sending the square into an uproar. The looks everyone gave me shifted instantly from contempt and disdain to utter shock and fear. The director of instruction opened the file and looked at the equity transfer agreement, and the bank statement printed in black and white on the white paper. His legs suddenly gave way, and he fell to his knees with a thud, scattering the documents he was holding all over the floor. No, that's impossible. Carter let go of Serena's hand, staggered backward like a madman, and shook his head frantically. You're just a poor student who grew up on welfare. There's no way you could have that much money. The power grid, the port, Abyss Capital. You did all of this? Carter, that $500 million you borrowed, with an interest rate of only 8%, is a real bargain. Isn't it? I walked up to him and looked down on this once arrogant heir to a financial empire, my voice as calm as if I were discussing today's weather. When you were flaunting the money I'd approved for you at that banquet, I was standing less than 3 meters away from you, holding the champagne glass you just drunk from. Carter was struck as if by lightning. His eyes instantly lost their focus. He finally realized that, from start to finish, he had been nothing more than a lab rat I'd been toying with. Not only had he gambled away his family's entire fortune, but he'd also incurred a massive debt he could never repay. Lincoln, I was wrong. I was blind. Just then, a figure suddenly lunged at me and clung tightly to my thigh. It was Serena. Her once delicate face was now a mess, streaked with tears and smudged makeup. She knelt at my feet like a stray dog, tilting her head back and looking at me with that pitiful, pleading gaze I once knew so well. Lincoln, you love me, don't you? We grew up together. It was all Carter's fault. He forced me to give false testimony to frame you. I don't love him at all, Selena cried out, trying to press her face against the leg of my suit pants. I'm willing to come back to you, as long as you forgive me. I'll do anything you ask. Looking at this girl, who once made me willing to give up everything, now kneeling on the ground like a foul-smelling rag, begging for mercy, I didn't feel even a shred of satisfaction at her downfall. All that remained was pure disgust. I kicked her away without mercy. Don't touch me with those hands that have touched trash. I stared coldly as she collapsed to the ground. Selena, all you care about is climbing your way into high society. So, as the chair of the board of trustees at this school, I hereby expel you permanently, and I guarantee that not a single company or family in the entire United States will dare to hire you. Take your vanity and crawl back down into the sewers of the slums. The bell of judgment has already tolled. I never leave even the slightest room for retreat for traitors and enemies. Security guards, what are you standing there for? Do I have to teach you myself how to clean up the trash on campus? I said in a cold tone, looking at the school's security guards standing there in a daze. The security guards, as if waking from a dream, immediately pounced on him like wolves. Carter was hauled to his feet like a limp rag. He offered no resistance, merely letting out that chilling, wretched laugh, as if his soul had been completely drained. As he was dragged away, several black sedans belonging to a Wall Street liquidation firm had already pulled up outside the school gates. Awaiting him were fraud charges amounting to hundreds of millions of dollars and a long prison term in a federal facility. As for Serena, she was being dragged out of the school by 2 female school security guards, who were gripping her arms without mercy. Her hands, once adorned with an expensive French manicure, clawed desperately at the grass, and she screamed my name with a voice so piercing it sounded like the wail of a tormented ghost in hell. I couldn't even be bothered to give her one last glance. I simply turned away and, surrounded by my bodyguards, boarded the helicopter again. 1 month later, downtown Los Angeles. Once the seat of power in Old Sterling, the towering Sterling Tower, now bears the dazzling 4 characters Abyss Capital in pure gold on its top floor. This is now my throne, wearing a pure black suit handcrafted by the finest tailors on London's Savile Row. I stood in the chairman's office on the top floor of the building, which spanned over 1,000 square meters. Through the wall of bulletproof glass, the bustling cityscape of Los Angeles lay spread out before me. Those tycoons and Wall Street magnates who once looked down on me from their lofty heights now line up every day like pilgrims, waiting below my office for an audience with me. Beep. The host has been detected as having established absolute dominance over Los Angeles's financial sector. Deep within my mind, that long-forgotten mechanical voice rang out once more. Congratulations, Mr. Vance. You have successfully completed the beginner revenge mission of the 100 billion yuan inheritance system. Intermediate-level access has been officially unlocked. The global asset allocation network is now available to you, and your available cash flow limit has been raised to unlimited. I gently swirled the glass of 50-year-old Macallan's single malt whiskey in my hand, a faint, detached smile playing at the corners of my mouth. The system gave me the key to unlock this world, but what truly allowed me to trample those self-important enemies underfoot was the cunning in my mind and my ruthless, unrelenting resolve. Money is merely a weapon, and I am the one pulling the trigger. Boss. Declan's voice came through the encrypted communicator on the desk. He was now the chief technology officer at Abyss Capital, earning an annual salary of 10 million. The final settlement report is in. Carter Sterling has been denied bail by the judge on charges of aggravated financial fraud and is expected to be sentenced to 20 years in prison. As for that woman named Serena, stop, I said, cutting him off. Starting today, those two names don't need to appear in my briefings anymore. The Abyss doesn't need to worry about whether the rats in the sewers live or die. Got it? Got it, boss. I'll wipe them completely from the database. Declan tactfully cut off the communication. The heavy double redwood doors to the office were pushed open. The crisp sound of high heels tapping against the marble floor echoed through the empty room. Avery Thorne walked in. Today she was wearing a long, deep burgundy silk gown, and though she still carried that aloof, haughty air, when she looked at me, her blue eyes burned with undisguised passion and devotion. Over the past month, fueled by the unlimited cash flow I provided, she had cut a swath through Wall Street like a bloodthirsty black widow, expanding Abyss Capital's footprint by a full threefold. Mr. Vance, or rather, Your Majesty. Avery walked over to me, took the glass of whiskey from my hand with the utmost naturalness, tilted his long neck back to take a sip, and then set the glass down on the side table. The handover of all core industries on the West Coast has been completed. Now, the heart of this city beats for you alone. I turned around and looked at this woman who had fought alongside me and taken the game of capital to its absolute extreme. She was the sharpest blade, and the person in this world who understood me best. It's us. I reached out, wrapped my arm around her slender waist, and pulled her into my embrace. Avery didn't resist. Instead, she let herself be guided onto my shoulders. She looked into my eyes, her breath fragrant as orchids, and the crisp scent of her perfume blended perfectly with the rich aroma of whiskey, exuding a deadly allure. So, as your CEO, what kind of reward can I expect? Her voice was hoarse yet captivating. Everything I have. I lowered my head and, without hesitation, pressed my lips against hers, which were painted with bright red lipstick. Avery responded passionately, her fingers clenching tightly around the lapels of my suit. At the pinnacle of power, a world brimming with money, power, and desire, this kiss, tinged with a sense of conquest, was our most defiant declaration to the world. Outside the window, night was beginning to fall over Los Angeles. The neon lights of the entire city lit up one after another beneath my feet, like a sea of stars, as if bowing in submission to their new master. My name is Lincoln Vance. Once upon a time, I was a penniless wretch trampled in the mud, an ant that could trample at will. But now, I am the embodiment of the Abyss, the tyrant of 100 billion in capital. In this empire that I shattered and rebuilt with my own hands, those who obey me thrive, and those who defy me perish. And this is just the beginning. The end.